What's going on, drivers? Young Diesel here, and we need to talk about something that just happened in California that has me absolutely fired up. And I'm not talking about another fuel tax or some random DOT regulation. No, this is different. This is bigger. And if you're a truck driver, if you know a truck driver, or if you've ever received a package delivered by a truck, which is literally everything you own, you need to pay attention to what I'm about to tell you. Before we get into this, make sure you hit that subscribe button and smash the notification bell because this story is developing fast and you're going to want to stay updated. Also, drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from and whether you think what's happening in California is going to spread to your state. Because trust me, it might. All right, let's get into this. So here's what happened. The U.S. Department of Transportation just dropped what they're calling emergency rules on California. And these rules, they're changing everything about who can and cannot hold a commercial driver's license in the state. Now, before you think this is just another bureaucratic shuffle, let me tell you about a guy named Vivek Sharma. Vivek has been driving trucks for 8 years. That's not some rookie who just got his CDL last week. This is a seasoned professional who knows the roads, knows the industry, and has been doing everything by the book. He came to this country legally. He's on a valid work visa under political asylum, and he's been working, paying taxes, supporting his family, doing everything right. But just recently, when he went to renew his CDL, he was told no, denied. Just like that, after 8 years of safe driving, after contributing to this industry, after doing everything legally, the state of California told him he can't drive anymore. And it's not because he did anything wrong. It's not because he failed a test or had a bad safety record. It's because of these new DOT rules that say if you're not a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident, you can't get your CDL renewed, period. End of story. Now let that sink in for a second. We're talking about people who are here legally, who have work authorization from the federal government, who have been vetted, who have been driving safely for years, and they're being told they can't work anymore. Now, the DOT is saying this is all about traffic safety. They're saying they need to close legal loopholes. They're saying California was being grossly negligent in how they were issuing these licenses. In fact, they're claiming that over 25% of CDLs in California were issued to people who shouldn't have had them according to federal standards. 25%. That's a quarter of all CDLs in the state. Now, whether you believe that number or not, the point is the feds are coming down hard and they're doing it fast. California has until the end of this month to comply with these new rules or they're going to face serious federal consequences. We're talking about the possibility of federal funding being pulled, federal oversight being imposed, and a whole mess of legal battles that could drag on for years. But here's the thing that nobody's really talking about. While all this bureaucratic back and forth is happening, real people are losing their livelihoods. Real families are being told that the breadwinner can't work anymore. And the supply chain that we all depend on, it's about to take a massive hit. Let me paint you a picture and the workforce there, it's incredibly diverse. They've got drivers who speak over 32 different languages. You've got immigrants, you've got minorities, you've got people from all over the world who came here for a better life and found it in trucking, because that's what this industry has always been about. Hard work, opportunity, the open road. But now, a huge chunk of that workforce is being told they're done. They can't drive anymore. And it's not just affecting them, it's affecting all of us. Because when you remove thousands of experienced drivers from the equation, you don't just hurt those drivers, you hurt the entire supply chain. And we've seen what happens when the supply chain breaks down. We lived through it during COVID. Remember that? Remember when you couldn't get basic goods because containers were stacked up at the ports? Remember the log jam of ships waiting offshore for weeks because there weren't enough drivers to move the freight? Industry insiders are already sounding the alarm they're saying we could be heading right back into that situation. And this time, it's not because of a pandemic. It's because of a policy decision that's removing qualified, experienced drivers from the roads at the worst possible time. Because here's the reality that nobody wants to talk about. We already have a massive driver shortage in this country. We've had it for years. The American trucking associations have been warning about this for a long time. We need more drivers, not fewer. And yet, here we are, with the federal government implementing rules that are going to make the shortage even worse. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. You might be saying, well, if they're not citizens, they shouldn't be driving. And look, I get it. I understand the desire to have strong borders and clear rules about who can and can't work in certain industries. But here's where it gets complicated. These aren't people who snuck across the border. These aren't people who are working under the table. These are people who went through the legal process. They applied for asylum. They got work visas. They were vetted by the federal government and told, yes, you can work here legally. And then they got their CDLs through the proper channels, passed all the tests, and have been driving safely for years. So what changed? Why are we suddenly telling these people that the rules have changed and they're out? And more importantly, who's going to replace them? Because that's the question nobody seems to have an answer for. The DOT can implement all the emergency rules they want, but if there aren't enough qualified drivers to fill the gaps, all they're doing is creating a bigger problem. And that bigger problem is going to hit all of us. Higher prices at the store, longer wait times for deliveries, supply chain disruptions that ripple through the entire economy. Let's talk about the timing of this for a second, because it's not like the trucking industry is doing great right now. The Port of Oakland has already been dealing with a slowdown in business because of tariffs. International trade has been rocky. Companies are nervous about the economy. And now you're going to add a driver shortage on top of all that. It's like throwing gasoline on a fire. You've got less freight moving through the ports, which means less work for drivers. But at the same time, you're removing drivers from the workforce, which means the drivers who are left are going to be overwhelmed trying to pick up the slack. And here's another thing that's not getting enough attention. When you remove experienced drivers from the roads, you're not just losing warm bodies, you're losing knowledge. You're losing people who know the routes, who know how to handle different types of cargo, who know how to navigate the complicated regulations and paperwork that come with this job. Vivek Sharma wasn't just any driver. He had 8 years of experience, 8 years of learning the ins and outs of this industry. And now, all that knowledge is gone because of a policy change that happened overnight. The trucking industry has always been a place where people could come and build a life for themselves. You didn't need a college degree. You didn't need connections. You just needed a willingness to work hard, to be safe, and to get the job done. And for a lot of immigrants, trucking was the pathway to the American dream. They came here, they got their CDL, they started driving, and they built something for themselves and their families. But now, that pathway is being closed off. And I have to ask, is that really making us safer? Or is it just making us feel better while we ignore the real consequences? The DOT is saying this is about gross negligence on California's part. They're saying the state was issuing CDLs to people who shouldn't have had them. But here's what I want to know. If these drivers were so dangerous, if they were such a threat to public safety, why weren't they causing problems? Where are the statistics showing that non-citizen drivers were getting into more accidents or violating more regulations? Because from what I can see, this isn't about safety. This is about politics. This is about the federal government wanting to look tough on immigration. And the easiest target was an industry that relies heavily on immigrant labor. And let's be real for a second. The trucking industry has always had a complicated relationship with regulation. On one hand, we need rules to keep everyone safe, We need standards for how trucks are maintained, how drivers are trained, how long people can drive without rest. Those regulations make sense, but on the other hand, we've also seen regulations that seem more about control than safety. Regulations that make our jobs harder without actually making the roads safer. And I think this is one of those situations. Now, California has a choice to make. They can comply with these federal rules and basically throw thousands of drivers under the bus. Or they can push back, fight this in court, and risk losing federal funding and facing all kinds of legal consequences. And honestly, I don't envy the position they're in, because no matter what they do, somebody's going to lose. If they comply, drivers lose their jobs and the supply chain takes a hit. If they fight it, they're going to be in a legal battle that could drag on for years, and in the meantime, nothing gets resolved. But here's what really gets me. While all this is happening, while politicians and bureaucrats are arguing about policy and regulations, real people are suffering. Vivek Sharma isn't a political talking point. He's a real guy with a real family who's trying to figure out how he's going to pay his bills now that he can't drive. And he's not alone. There are thousands of drivers in California right now who are in the same boat. They did everything right. They followed the rules, and now they're being punished for it. And let's talk about what this means for the rest of the country. Because if you think this is just a California problem, you're not paying attention. California is often the testing ground for policies that eventually spread to other states. We've seen it with emissions regulations, with labor laws, with all kinds of things. So if this CDL restriction sticks in California, how long before other states start implementing similar rules? How long before the federal government decides to make this a nationwide policy? And if that happens, we're not talking about thousands of drivers losing their jobs. We're talking about tens of thousands, maybe more. We're talking about a supply chain crisis that makes COVID look like a minor inconvenience. Because here's the thing, the trucking industry is already stretched thin. We don't have a surplus of drivers sitting around waiting for work. Every driver matters. Every CDL holder is a critical part of keeping this country running. And when you start removing people from that workforce for reasons that have nothing to do with their ability to do the job safely, you're asking for trouble. I've been in this industry long enough to know that trucking is the backbone of America. Everything you have, everything you use, everything you buy, it came on a truck at some point. The food in your fridge, the clothes in your closet, the phone you're watching this video on right now, all of it was delivered by a truck driver. And when you start messing with the workforce that makes all that possible, you're messing with the entire economy. Now, I want to be clear about something. I'm not saying we shouldn't have standards for who can get a CDL. I'm not saying we shouldn't have rules and regulations. But what I am saying is that those rules need to make sense. They need to be based on actual data and actual safety concerns, not on politics or immigration policy. And from where I'm sitting, this looks a lot more like the latter than the former. The DOT is talking about closing legal loopholes. But what loopholes are we talking about exactly? These drivers weren't exploiting loopholes. They were following the law as it existed. They got work visas. They got asylum status. They were told by the federal government that they could legally work in the United States. And then they went through the process of getting their CDL, which, by the way, is not easy. You have to pass written tests. You have to pass a driving test. You have to pass a medical exam. You have to prove that you can safely operate a commercial vehicle. And these drivers did all of that. So where's the loophole? The more I think about this, the more it feels like we're being sold a narrative that doesn't match reality. We're being told this is about safety, but I'm not seeing the evidence that non-citizen drivers are less safe than citizen drivers. We're being told this is about closing loopholes, but I'm not seeing what loopholes are actually being closed. What I am seeing is a lot of people losing their jobs and a supply chain that's about to get a lot more fragile. And let's talk about the economics of this for a second, because trucking is not a cheap industry to get into. Getting your CDL costs money. Maintaining your license costs money. Keeping your medical certification current costs money. And for a lot of immigrant drivers, they invested everything they had into building a career in trucking. They spent their savings on training. They worked long hours for low pay when they were starting out. They sacrificed time with their families to build something. And now, after all that investment, after all that sacrifice, they're being told it was all for nothing. Think about what that does to a person. Think about what it's like to have the rug pulled out from under you like that. You did everything right. You played by the rules, you worked hard, and then the rules change and suddenly you're on the outside looking in. That's not just an economic problem. That's a human problem. That's a family problem. That's a community problem. And the ripple effects of this are going to be felt for a long time. Because when you force thousands of drivers out of the industry, you don't just lose their labor. You lose their purchasing power. You lose their tax contributions. You lose the money they were spending at truck stops, at restaurants, at all the businesses that depend on truckers. And those businesses, they're going to feel the pain too. I keep coming back to it's not the consumers who are going to pay higher prices because of supply chain disruptions. So who is this for? Who is this helping? The only answer I can come up with is that this is about optics. This is about the federal government wanting to look tough on immigration, even if it means shooting ourselves in the foot economically. Because make no mistake, this is an own goal. This is us creating a problem that didn't need to exist. We had a functioning system where legal workers could get CDLs and contribute to the economy. And now we're tearing that system down. And for what? So we can say we cracked down on something? Look, I know some of you watching this have strong feelings about immigration, and that's fine. We can disagree about immigration policy, but what we shouldn't disagree about is the basic fact that removing qualified workers from a critical industry during a labor shortage is a bad idea. That's just common sense. And if we can't agree on that, then I don't know what to tell you. The deadline is coming fast. California has until the end of this month to comply with these federal rules. And as that deadline approaches, the tension is building. Drivers are worried. Trucking companies are worried. Port operators are worried. And they should be, because the consequences of this policy are going to be real and they're going to be felt quickly. I want you to think about this the next time you're at the store and something you need isn't on the shelf. Think about it the next time your online order gets delayed. Think about it the next time you hear about supply chain problems or shipping delays, because this is where it starts. This is how those problems are created, not by some abstract market force, but by policy decisions made in government offices, by people who don't have to live with the consequences. And here's the thing that really gets me. The people making these decisions, the people at the Department of Transportation and in Congress who are pushing these rules, they're not going to feel the impact. They're still going to get their deliveries on time. They're still going to have fully stocked shelves at their local grocery stores, because when you have money and power, you're insulated from these problems. But for the rest of us, for working people, for drivers, for families, we're the ones who are going to pay the price. So what can we do about this? Well, first off, we can talk about it. We can share this information. We can make sure people understand what's really happening and what the consequences are going to be. Because I guarantee you, most people have no idea this is even going on. This isn't getting covered by the mainstream media. This isn't trending on social media, but it should be, because this is a big deal. Second, we can reach out to our representatives. We can call them, email them, let them know that we're paying attention and we're not okay with this. Politicians respond to pressure. They respond to their constituents. And if enough people make their voices heard, maybe, just maybe, we can get them to reconsider this policy before it's too late. And third, we can support the drivers who are being affected by this, whether that's through donations, through advocacy, or just by spreading awareness of their situation. These are people who have given years of their lives to this industry. They deserve better than to be cast aside like this. The clock is ticking, the deadline is approaching, and the decisions that get made in the next few weeks are going to have consequences that last for years. We're standing at a crossroads right now. We can either continue down this path and deal with all the problems that come with it, or we can pump the brakes, take a step back, and figure out a better way forward. A way that keeps us safe without destroying the livelihoods of thousands of people who are just trying to do their jobs. I know this video has been long, but this topic is important. This is about more than just trucking. This is about how we treat people. This is about whether we're going to have a functioning economy or whether we're going to let politics destroy the systems that keep this country running. And I hope you'll stick with me as this story continues to develop, because it's not over, not by a long shot. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think about all this. Do you think the federal government is right to implement these rules? Do you think California should fight back? Or do you have a completely different take on the whole situation? I want to hear from you, and make sure you're subscribed, because this story is moving fast and I'll be keeping you updated as things develop. This is Young Diesel, and I'll catch you on the next one. Stay safe out there, drivers.